Hello. Today we're going to make my version of quote-unquote crustless quiche, which starts out with an 8x8 pyrex pan into which I've put 12 ounces of feta. So the feta cheese I use is because it's salty and I don't have to season, but I slice it up into pieces and I just fit it in. You can use crumbled feta. I just happen to have large slabs of it, so it kind of looks very neat and orderly, if you will. So 12 ounces of feta into the Pyrex 8x8 pan. I use 8 ounces of mushrooms, which we're going to dice up and saute. We also use 10 ounces of spinach. I use frozen spinach because it's just easier. I have defrosted this because it was frozen, and I'm going to chop it up so it's not stringy. So that's going to go in as well. We're going to use a whole pepper. We're going to dice that pepper up, and I use 6 eggs. So you'll notice there's no actual milk or milk products in this. I don't find the need for it. This does become a bit dense. So if you want to lighten it up, you can actually add some milk to it. But you want to make sure that once you fill this, it doesn't overflow the actual pan itself. And I use some olive oil to do my sauteing, but I'm also going to put a little bit of olive oil here at the bottom. So go ahead and do that before we forget. And it's just going to make it a little bit more unctuous, having some fat in there aside from the crumbly cheese. So let's go ahead and get started. Well, we've got our vegetables prepped. We cut up our pepper, we cut up our mushroom. We're going to go ahead and add some olive oil to the pan. You can use butter if you would prefer. I like to use olive oil. I just like the flavor, but if you use butter, it will add a nice flavor to it as long as you're using really flavorful butter. All right, so we're going to let that warm up just a little bit. Going to let it, as soon as it starts to look like it's shimmering a little bit, we're going to go ahead and add it. Now, I've been asked before why I don't use onions in this, which you can do. You can definitely use onions. You can make this your own however you want. Everything is game for this type of dish. This is the combination that I have started using. I've also chopped up the spinach, which we're not going to cook. We're going to leave the spinach raw. The spinach is already blanched when you buy it for frozen, so it's no big deal to not cook it because it's going to get cooked anyway. So we're going to get our peppers going, and you'll notice I'm not going to add any seasoning. And the reason I don't add any seasoning is because we have so much salt in our feta that when you eat each bite, you should have a nice balanced feel. So we're going to let these cook for just a few minutes, and then we're going to add our mushrooms in. We're going to take our peppers out. We're going to add our mushrooms in, and we're going to make sure everything gets cooked through so that when we put it into the pan with the eggs, we don't have an issue with a lot of moisture. So we're essentially cooking out the moisture right now. So we're going to give this a good little stir. And like I said, we'll let this cook for just a few minutes, and then we'll take it out of the pan. Okay, so it's been a few minutes, and you can see we've got some nice browning going on. And these are pretty much ready. I like to have a little bit of browning. That caramelization really works well for me. So I'm going to use my spoon here so I don't get as much oil out. We're going to use all of it, but I'm going to leave as much in here as possible for the mushrooms. So just scoop all this out. I'm going to let it cool, and that's one of the things you have to be aware of, because when we put this all together, I actually want all the ingredients to be cool, if not, I'm not going to say cold, but they should be at least at room temperature. They should not be hot because it'll curdle the eggs when we add the eggs on top. All right, so you can see I have a good amount of oil still left over. If you don't, go ahead and add some more in. Let's get these last two pieces out. And we know our pan is already hot, so we're going to go ahead and add our mushrooms. Mushrooms are mostly water, so these are going to cook down to like half their volume. So this is one of those things that is okay. We want that water to dissipate. So we're going to let that cook for a little bit. I'm going to taste this little piece of pepper. Oh, that's so good. And there's no seasoning on it, just a little bit of olive oil. But the sweetness of the pepper has come through now. All right, so we're going to let this cook down to about half its volume. And you'll see everybody's going to look nice and brown here in just a couple minutes. All right, so we've left our mushrooms alone so that they can caramelize nicely. And you can see this nice, beautiful brown color that they're getting. Just going to give them a stir. We're going to let them sit for another, I'd say about two or 3 minutes here on the heat. And then we're going to turn it off and take them out, put them in our bowl, and let them cool. And then we'll be ready for assembly. All right, we're ready for assembly. We have our oven on 325 so that it's ready to go. And this is where you need to use your clean hands and really just get to know your food. So we're going to sprinkle the spinach evenly over our feta cheese. I mean, you can just plop it on if you want, but I like to have a nice even amount across. So I'm pulling it apart as I do it. Now I did chop it, so that's why it's in smaller pieces. But I just want to make sure I don't end up with like a big old hunk of spinach in one and no spinach in another. So we're strategically placing pieces as we sprinkle them around and separating it at the same time. So your hands are going to be colorful by the time we're done here. Get all that out. We don't want to waste anything. Okay, so peppers. Same idea here. You want to make sure you get enough in every part. There we go. Beautiful. And then lastly, our cooled mushrooms. So again, we're going to just make sure there's enough on every section, because we can cut this into fourths, we can cut it into sixths. Just depends on how big a piece you want. If you do it in six, remember everybody's essentially having 1 egg, which with all these vegetables is kind of plenty for a serving, but it just depends on how you're using it. Because I will use this as a breakfast item. I'll also use it as a side item for brunch. All right, so we've got all of our assembly ready to go except for our eggs. So we'll just whisk up our eggs. And that's 6 eggs. You want to make sure all those yolks are broken and the egg is well combined. See, there's a holdout right there. All right, we're going to get our spatula that we were using earlier just to get all of that off. And now we're just going to pour this on. And this will puff up. All right, so now we're ready to go into the oven at 325 for about 20 minutes. So carefully take this over to the oven and 325 for 20 minutes. Okay, let's check it out. Let's see how this turned out. Our 20 minutes are over. See, we got a nice golden color at the top. And yeah, it's nice and firm. So we're going to let this finish up here. I'm just going to turn off the oven, and then I'm going to take it out and we'll let it cool for about 10 minutes just so that it doesn't fall apart, because there's a lot of vegetables in there. So we're going to go ahead and turn this oven off, let it cool on a rack for about 10 minutes, and then we'll go ahead and cut into it. All right, our quiche has cooled for 10 minutes, so here you have it. You can see we've got layers, and we've got a nice browning happening here at the top. You can leave this to get to room temperature and serve it with a salad, or as I said before, you can have it as your breakfast item. I use a fish spatula lots of times to cut this, and you can cut it into six pieces, 4 pieces, just depends. I like to have a nice little corner, so I just put this straight down, and then you can just scoop a piece out, and it'll be something you can have for brunch, for lunch, or for breakfast. So give it a try. I think you're going to find that is delicious. Enjoy.